Welcome back to Two Who's Review. I'm Alex,
I'm Fitz.
and today we are beginning the brand new season of Doctor Who, Series 15, aka Season 2. We will be reviewing The Robot Revolution, which is the season premiere, the introduction of Miss Belinda Chandra, as I don't think anyone after watching this episode will ever be able to forget this character's full name ever again. So this one has a lot packed into it. Surprisingly so for a season opener. What did you think of it?
I think you've hit the nail right on the head there. I think, look, given how much is in this story, how much has been basically crushed into 45 minutes, I'm actually surprised and pretty impressed how cohesive the whole thing is. With that said, I do still think the story's overstuffed. There are a lot of things with the plot, obviously, because it is pretty madcap, but also even thematically it's trying to deal with, and it's not quite expressing all of those themes as well as I think it should be. And so, while overall it's an enjoyable story, I think there are some definite problem areas. I will say, though, I've now watched this twice, as I normally do. The things that I didn't like about it the first time are basically the same on a second watch, but the things I did like about it the first time got a little bit better on the second watch, so make that of what you will.
Yeah, totally. I think I'm basically of the same opinion as you here. I thought it was a solid enough opener. I think I personally enjoy this more than Space Babies from last season as an opener, that is. Which does sort of by default make it the best season opener since at least season 10, which is a bit weird to say. Best season opener in what, 8 years? That's a bit shocking. But yeah, look, I think Belinda's probably a good place to start.
Yeah, sure.
It's interesting what they're doing with her so far. I've seen a lot of comparisons to former companions, which is obviously going to happen, and I do like that it's sort of like it's a lot of the superfluous information regarding Martha in the same job, all that stuff, but it's mixing in some of the defiance of Donna, where Belinda is very willing to hold the Doctor to account, which I think is a pretty good choice considering how basically on board Ruby was for really everything last
season. It's a nice contrast.
It is a nice contrast. It's good to have that twist as well. Yeah,
but with that though,
yeah, go on.
Oh, sorry, please. I was going to say, with your comparisons to Martha, that does make sense because you've got that kind of combative back and forth. But I think with Belinda, it is different enough to still be really interesting because with Donna, particularly with Catherine Tate's comedic performance, there was a lot of comedy in that combativeness. Maybe not all the time, but a lot of it. Here, there doesn't really seem to be much of that or any of it, and I actually find that kind of refreshing because it's a very it kind of forces us to take Belinda's concerns really seriously, and I think that's a really interesting really kind of a subversion on the normal Doctor Companion dynamic, which shows up in a number of moments in the story, which I'll get into later. But either way, it's interesting, and I like the fact that they've gone this route.
Yes, and I do like what we've gotten of Belinda so far. She's showing all of the good earmarks of a really solid companion. She's proactive. She makes decisions without the Doctor's input, like how she just basically immediately leaps into action to start taking care of the wounded rebels. She's got compassion, which we see in her self-sacrifice. She's got ingenuity when she's able to piece together the Doctor's plan by bringing together the two certificates. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing these traits be expanded upon in future episodes.
Same.
But
I think well, as I said, with Donna, a lot of that combativeness was comedic, But
Mm.
even in the smaller moments when Belinda is calling out the Doctor on some of his behavior, and I'm not even talking about the ending, there's small things she says, don't shush me and things like that. That was really good, I thought, because just as a Who fan myself, it allows me to think, oh, you know what? Yeah, that's a little weird, Doctor, and you sort of steamroll moments a lot. Maybe you shouldn't do that. And the fact that we have this character who is, again, not comedically but seriously calling him out on this, I think is just really interesting, and I really would like to see where it's going.
I think it also helps, and it's something that I don't think is really that obvious at first. But this is one of few companions we've gotten that has not been like in their late teens, early 20s when the Doctor picks him up. Like she's got to be in her early 30s at least, and that's being generous if in the flashback scenes she's 13. And I think that's part of what makes Belinda so self-assured in herself. Like she's got a bit more lived history than prior companions have had, and she's just generally have more experience. She's willing to back herself to stand on her own 2 feet a bit more often. Which I think is interesting. It certainly makes it stand apart from people like Martha and Rory, who were quite young characters, despite having similar professions when they boarded the TARDIS.
Well, even you can see this in the beginning with the way that Belinda takes charge during her nursing. You get the impression that this isn't her first day on the job, right? So, and working as a nurse who, I couldn't tell exactly, but it looked like she was working in the ER. That surely would have to affect you considerably. So it's just an interesting foundation for a character, I think.
I'll tell you what's really fascinating about this story, and it's something that gets not swept under the rug, but there's not as huge of a spotlight shone on it as we'd expect. This episode is also the final story for a companion that we never got to see. Sasha 55, the Doctor.
Or got to see very, very briefly.
Well, yeah, but Doctors, there was 6 months of not necessarily adventures, but adventure on this one planet that we never got to see. The Doctor clearly bonded with Sasha and had her pegged as his next companion.
Yeah.
And as soon as that happened, I went, oh no, I know what's going to happen here.
But she says, you'll take me to the stars, won't you, Doctor?
Yep. Well, I don't think you saw your name in the opening titles, so I'm very sorry, Sasha, but...
15 seconds later...
Dead. Yeah.
Gets destroyed.
But you wonder how many times that must have happened. Like, obviously, Big Finish has expanded upon non-TV Doctor adventures, where there have been companions that we've never seen, particularly for the 8th Doctor. But... I think it's something fascinating that makes this universe feel way more lived in, that we as the viewer only ever get to see a glimpse into the Doctor's life.
Yeah. I think it is quite a strong thing in terms of world building, but also theme and character, which is really great. And it's why, even though it seemed, I wouldn't say out of place, but very, I guess, seemingly sudden, when he takes that moment to cry over Sasha's death, it felt really right. Obviously that's because of Ncuti Gatwa's great performance, but even in terms of the writing, it's a good moment for the audience to stop and reflect. Oh yeah, this is a person he got to know for 6 months. And it also reminds us, as you say, we only get a surprisingly small snapshot of, this character's life. It's funny, and I'll probably go back to referencing this episode again later on, but if you look at The Chase, I think I said when we reviewed it, we see all these bizarre episodes in the Doctor and Companion's lives, but that's just what we see, right? That's just...
Yeah.
This might sound strange, but it's what the writers decided were the most interesting episodes in The Chase, but we don't know how many planets they visited or how long the Daleks chased them for, so that's kind of reflected here, and it's kind of great that it's highlighted.
It makes me look forward to the inevitable in 10 years' time. Big Finish run of audio adventures with Ncuti Gatwa and Sasha on Miss Belinda Chandra. Um,
Yeah.
Speaking of Ncuti Gatwa, he's still great in this role. He hasn't lost a beat from his previous appearances. I love that the creative team are sticking to their guns regarding this character's now current characterization. He's
Yeah,
still
I
willing
agree.
to cry. He's still kind of effeminate at times. I'm so happy that a side of the fan base that has attributed superficial characteristics with core traits have not had their say.
Mm. Well,
Um,
it's funny that you actually mentioned that because well, one, I think you're correct. All of the character traits that we've seen from the character show up. I was quite fond of how after crying solidly over Sasha's death, he immediately just kind of shuts it down, which is very consistent to what we've seen in the last season, and that's really interesting.
absolutely, yeah.
But I'll give you an example of these sort of smaller traits. There's the bit right near the end where he does this sort of, air kick and says, "Yes, Queen." And I thought to myself, if any other doctor said that, I'd be grinding my teeth because I'd be like, that just feels so out of place. What the fuck are the writers doing? But for one reason or another, it feels completely right with Ncuti Gatwa's performance. It didn't bother me at all. There were other elements in that scene that bothered me, but we'll get into that later. But that moment felt fine. It worked. So I think it's a question of both Ncuti Gatwa and the writing team, one, understanding this character pretty well by this point, and also, more importantly, having the confidence to write this character the way that they want, which has been there from day one, which is interesting because that's not that common with even many Doctor, the writing of many Doctor characters, right? I mean, I think you even said yourself, Capaldi took like a season to really figure out who he was, which is curious. But yeah, that's all good.
I think it's more the writers just didn't know what to do with him in that first season. They tried to really pivot from Matt Smith's energy, and then they made him just angry instead. And then they sort of calmed down by season 9 and went, no. This Doctor can still be fun, just in his own way.
Yeah. And then he became, as you said, Fun Uncle by the end.
The Fun Uncle, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, which is... Because I remember a while ago, just on a whim, I watched, Deep Breath, with the horrifying thing where people don't die. Is that it? Or maybe or is it...
Ooh.
Or is it Dark Water?
Oh, that's Dark Water. That's Dark Water.
Yeah. I watched that and I'm like, how is this the same character? Like, what the fuck am I watching here? This makes no sense. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. We'll get to that eventually.
Totally. There were a lot of elements of this script and plot that felt really Moffat-esque, and by that I mean just the time travel shenanigans of it all. Moffat was always a writer that loved playing with time, and Russell has, but not that he never lent on that. His thing was usually more, the alien side of things. We get a lot of time travel shenanigans in this story, and I like what they did with it. I like how, it was a very, very loose explanation for it, just that the two planets are kind of bumping into each other time-wise, and then that's all we really need to know. But then we get really, really fun stuff while abducting Belinda, they learn about this other guy they should abduct, but then they grab him 10 years earlier, and as a result, begin the uprising that led to them needing Belinda in the first place. That's such a classic Moffat bootstrap paradox.
I was wondering, because as you say, there's the timey-wiminess of it all, and hilarious that phrase crops up in this episode, by the way. But, on a deeper writing level,
I love that Belinda calls it out. It's so funny when
what am I, 6?
says that, and Belinda's like, what, am I 6? What does that mean?
Yeah, which is kind of great. But on a deeper writing level, as you say, the use of this sort of seemingly throwaway line turning into a weird bootstrap twist, that's classic Moffat. And that element and the things surrounding it, I don't know if it's as successful as it could be, and maybe not even as successful as you may think it is. I'll, again, go into that later. But the fact that it's in here at all like that, it was actually quite entertaining and very, very charming, I thought.
Well, I suspect a big part of that is that we still don't have a full resolution to the bootstrap, right? We still don't know
Yeah.
how the planetary certificate ended up back in time. They've intentionally left that open as a little unresolved, tantalizing morsel for what we can
I
expect to see
think
in the future.
that's part of it, but there were also some. They felt like kind of logical inconsistencies. I think one that stuck out to me was so she says, "Go get this guy." Like, because I knew him so many years ago, but how did they know it was specifically him? I mean, I get that name might be not like because she gave them his full name. I get that it's not
Full
maybe
name and
super
also
common.
where she thinks he moved to. That was a big part as well.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. It just
Like, I very
given
much doubt
how
another person with my full name
who
anywhere in
lived
the
in
suburb of Illawarra, let alone like the specific suburb I live in.
yeah, I guess so. I don't know. I think just because of how rapid this plot is, maybe I just wanted some of those smaller elements to be stronger. But we'll get to it later on when we get into more detail.
Mhm. Um, and I love that it's still goofy. It's still a goofy show. Just the idea of one person, what is effectively like we know that those things are scams, right? The whole pay us money, we'll name a star after you. Like, that's not a real thing.
Hmm.
That's, at least some places. I don't doubt that there's a way to get it in touch with NASA and be like, yes, can I have a star named after me, please? But a lot of the internet ones, especially back in 2007, most likely scams.
Hey,
The fact that that ended up bootstrapping into like a legitimate name for the entire planet somehow, and like the entire solar
and a
system actually, and a people, a species named after them, like that's just classic Doctor Who goofiness, and it's really fun.
yeah. Um, I'd wondered about that. Because yeah, it is goofy, and the fact is, Doctor Who's a goofy show. I mean, if you can't admit that, then maybe you need to be having a little think and maybe a different conversation. But
Yeah.
I wondered whether it's not that it was too silly, because again, we reviewed The Chase. Do we really need to say much more on that?
No.
But I'd wondered, was it was most of the elements in the story, was it too ridiculous to mesh with all the other elements? Again, I apologize if I'm getting a bit ahead of myself, but
Mhm.
this is partly why I say I'm not sure how cohesive this story is, because that stuff is really fun, and I think it's very clever how RTD worked it into the plot. The fact that this seemingly dumb joke, as you say, the getting a star named after you, and then the throwaway line of Belinda saying, "Oh, go get this annoying person." The fact that it winds up as a legitimate plot element, that is quite clever in of itself. But I'm not sure how well it's all fitting together. Like, it works basically enough in terms of plot. Maybe there are some small elements that I didn't perhaps gel with, but the plot works well enough on its own, especially how cluttered it is. But I think maybe even thematically it may not
Well, I don't.
quite gel together.
I'm not sure I agree with all of that. I
Hmm.
think. Well, okay. Let's an elephant in the room. Let's just get out
Yeah,
ahead of it. A
yeah,
big thematic component of the back part of this episode was it was basically shooting down possessive incel culture. Essentially,
mm,
this like totally ridiculous viewpoint of you're my you're my girl, I own you, I get to dictate your behavior. That's a big part of the back half of the episode. And in
yeah.
fact, I'm really happy that in the first minute of the episode, I hear the guy say, I know girls don't like math or something like that. And I
Yeah,
went, that's a bit weird. And then
yeah.
it ended
And
up
then it
being
just
like
keeps
a
getting
complete
worse.
part. Well, the fact that that single line was like completely indicative of who this
Mm,
guy is as a person,
yeah.
and I clocked it immediately. It
Oh yeah.
shows, like, yeah, okay, this was really well written. Um,
I think for me when I heard that line. I don't think it struck me as much as the other lines in that scene did, but it was really weird. And I have to say, watching it again, I actually think that opening scene is executed quite well because you've
Yeah.
got a very classically romantic scene. You've got the guy and his girlfriend. And oh my god, he's bought her a star because that's a thing, I guess. And you've
Mhm.
got also Murray Gold's really nice romantic
Yeah.
score, and you've got the panning of the camera from them sitting on the bench to the stars. But all the while, you got really uncomfortable lines from this guy, and
Yeah.
even if the whole thing didn't hit me immediately with that first line, it definitely did by the time he kind of aggressively just said, "Well, are you married?" And I'm like, "Oh, uh, I mean, I don't know."
Yeah.
you,
But
you,
then, but here's
this
why
is
I
this is
think
a
that.
little
But
unfortunate.
then, when you learn that that guy is the AI generator or the OWL generator, which is just
Mm,
another fucking classic, like bit of wordplay that is cropped up every
mm,
now and then in this show, and whenever it happens, I'm like, oh my god, that's so stupid, but it works.
mm,
Um, but and then you piece together, oh, this guy, he's treating this planet named after her like he would her.
mm,
You know, he has the exact same level of iron grip control that he wants to
mm,
exert over the planet named after her, as much as he would have had her had the relationship continued and progressed. I think
mm.
that element of thematic nature ties so much back in, like the whole planet named after her. Having Alan be the bad guy, I think, is a perfect wraparound thematically to make it all link together.
See, I agree. On principle, I think the concept of having him be the villain and have it tie in this way is a very good idea. But for me, the execution was not where I wanted to be, and I was going to discuss this later on, but I guess now that we're here, so
Might as well.
basically, yeah. So basically, as I said, this story is pretty cluttered. There's a lot going on, and even thematically, there's a lot going on. The problem with that is I think realistically all the ideas could have been given more focus and have lent the story more weight. You could have essentially made a couple of different episodes with this one, and I don't mean like a multi-parter, I mean like completely separate stories. But the problem for me is when you have this theme, which, let's be honest, it's a pretty serious theme. Like, I know they play it off as a joke at many points, but this dude he's a misogynist. Let's be
He's
very
awful.
clear
Yeah.
about that. He is using coercive control, which is really uncomfortable and repulsive. And he's applied it on a mass scale. Now, the problem is these are very weighty and worthy themes, and they need to be explored and dissected in a really good way. But the problem is because it's getting crushed into this story, which is only 45 minutes long and already overstuffed with everything else. In order for that theme to be effective, even on a basic level, for me personally, it's explored in a way that feels a bit contrived and kind of blunt. And you can see this not so much with like the early stuff or even the concepts, as I say, behind linking it all together. Because I think having him be this he's a bit of a joke, right? He's just one of these lonely. Don't worry, guys. The male loneliness epidemic is totally real. I'm so sad. I'm so depressed. By the way, lady, you're going to be wearing what I want you to wear when we're dating. You know what I mean? This sort of person, and it's very easy to make fun of them. But because there isn't a lot of focus given to not just his characterization, but I think more importantly the way misogyny impacts his beliefs and especially the women around him. It doesn't come across as authentically as I want it to, and I think it's all symbolized. Like this problem, it's all symbolized in that final confrontation. So there's that bit where Belinda literally says, you've taken coercive control and applied it to the whole planet. At first, I wasn't sure about that line because I felt like it was a bit on the nose. It was literally saying, what was sort of happening, which I historically have sort of had issues with that sort of writing to say. But on reflection, I thought, oh no, I get like it makes sense, right? And how the fuck else are you going to describe that? Because coercive control is what it is. So all right, that makes sense. But then it bothered me when she literally just said "Planet of the Incels." Now it makes sense for a number of reasons. It makes sense, I think, for her character. It makes sense for his character, and even as a very basic way to get that world building across. The problem I have with it is that a word like incel, accurate though it is and useful though it is, it at this point it almost feels like a meme. And well, first off, you know how I feel about memes, Cuff, when it comes to TV shows. But specifically with this issue, I think the issue of misogyny and inceldom, or whatever you want to call it, is a weighty and worthy theme, an important one, and to have it sort of conveyed so bluntly with this, again, this really memey line, and also the very, in my view, I guess, simplistic signifiers of who this guy is, because they show him, oh, he's a gamer, he thinks, my god, it's just like a video game, and I get to decide the rules. It feels cheap to me, if I'm completely honest. And it doesn't, as much as I love the concept, execution, I just don't think it works as well for me as I want it to.
Here's the thing.
You may disagree with that, fair enough.
I do, and I'll tell you why. Yeah. It's the year 2025. The age of being subtle with this kind of behavior is well and truly gone. Like, we are living in a time where, like, we just shouldn't have to deal with it anymore. I say we, like the two of us deal with it on a regular basis.
Yeah, like,
but like, you see it online, you see it online, 50% of the population deals with it in person on a regular basis. And I think that especially for a kids show, if at least one kid sees the stuff that Alan was saying to Belinda about how she dresses and not going out with friends and all that stuff, and thinks to themselves, God, that guy's awful, I don't want to be like that when I grow up, then it's done its job. And at that point, like I said, like, I don't want this kind of character to be anything more than a caricature, because at the end of the day, that's who these people kind of are. Like, and I'm sorry, but that's just kind of the truth. Like, they all repeat exactly the same diatribes because they're all in the same echo chamber, basically. I don't need any deeper meaning behind him. I don't need his character to be more fleshed out. I just need him to be awful, so that the audience of, again, impressionable viewers who watch Doctor Who and learn from Doctor Who and are inspired by the Doctor and their companions can see them standing up to this kind of behavior and learning that it's not okay. I think that's way more important than devoting in what is, in my opinion, unnecessary time to giving Alan a richer backstory.
Good point. The only counter argument at the minute that I can think of is there was a similar, not like exactly similar themes, but there was a sort of a similar twist, I think, in Dot and Bubble with very serious themes. Let's be very clear.
Yes.
But I thought that was executed much better in Dot and Bubble than it was.
I agree.
Here,
I agree with that. And I guess maybe it's just... Look, I have a feeling that if this episode hadn't been a premiere, where it has to establish a new companion as well as set up mysteries for the season, like, it would have had maybe, like, 2 extra minutes, and that's all it would have needed. But I think for what they did with it, and for the time that they had, I'm happy with what they gave me. Maybe 1 or 2 lines felt a bit out of place, but honestly, the rest of it is such a clear cautionary tale that it's fantastic to me. Because this is the kind of behavior that I just can't stop.
Oh yeah. No, it's and I'll say a couple of things here. One, the lines that I have problems with, well, the one line really the Planet of the Incels line. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that line was cut out, and the rest of the episode was kind of left how it was. That may not solve all the problems I have, but it would make it a bit better for me. So I think it's the core of what it's doing, and even to an extent how it's doing it is a good idea. Certainly, the very least you can say is my God, RTD's heart is in the right place. But I still think that there's an issue there. Oh, I remember what I was going to say now. The other thing is, when I say, as you sort of interpreted it as, me wanting to have more backstory, for example, with Alan, I should probably clarify this. When I mean that, I don't mean that as a way to generate any more sympathy for him, because you're right, he's awful, and I think even beyond the young audience angle, I think that behavior does absolutely need to be framed as a unequivocal negative. I think for me, I was just kind of more interested to see what's the process, I guess, of how a young man, for example, how do they get indoctrinated? What about the rhetoric is particularly toxic? To be fair, though, we do see a lot of why that's toxic in the episode, because Jesus Christ.
I just don't think I'm interested in seeing that.
Sure.
I don't think Doctor Who is a method of teaching people how toxic behavior comes about. I think that Doctor Who should be far more concerned in teaching what behavior is not to be tolerated.
I suppose so. And it's not as if Doctor Who hasn't done that before. There's been many instances where, even in the classic series, where the Doctor's called out, imperialism and war and bigotry, without having to give a big explanation.
This is why it happens, yeah.
I think for me, and granted, maybe I can't actually think of a more of a logical defense for this. This could just be an issue of me saying, I don't like how this is being executed. But I think, as I said, this is already a very overstuffed narrative, and I like all the ideas in it. But I would have preferred, honestly, if they had been given even separate episodes to explore them. Now, look, I get that, obviously, we're not in a perfect world, and these episodes have to be written. RTD's got to tell this story.
Well, what are the...
the story of the whole thing. Yeah, go ahead.
What are the different things you think are, worthy of separation in this story? Because in my mind, they are so intrinsically linked together that I don't think they do warrant separate episodes.
I mean, as I said, they do come together effectively enough in the end. Given how many things happen in this plot, it fits together surprisingly cohesively by the end. But you've got the misogyny angle. You've got new companion, who one has to be established, but also has to provide an element of subversion. You've got a weird robot revolution. You've got a weird bit where it's is the villain AI? No, it's actually not. It's actually this thing. So that seems almost like I don't want to say a twist for twist's sake, but the point is I've seen better twists in Doctor Who stories.
Oh.
So I think, and then you've got really serious confrontations with mortality. And even though, as I said, I like the pause in the story, but that was handled very well, I just think there are a lot of ideas here that work just well enough. Certainly, we've seen much, much worse stories which try to have way too many ideas in them. But I want them... I'd prefer these really interesting ideas to be teased out more thoroughly in separate episodes. That being said, as I say, we're not living in a perfect world. I get that that's not really possible.
I just think that a robot takeover is not enough to hold its own for an episode.
Maybe.
I think that some of these ideas are perhaps, and maybe you might.
But you've also got
disagree, but I think
the weird timey-wimey stuff as well.
yeah, but
coming
again,
in. I mean,
I just don't think these concepts are as separate as you're making them out to be. I think that they are. I don't know. Maybe it is just that so much of the end of the episode has to be devoted to setting up a mystery, and that's really all. That's really all that is getting in the way of fleshing out these things, in my opinion. Because I don't think these concepts can be separated and still be what they are.
Yeah, that's possible. But yeah,
and to be clear, to be absolutely inherently clear, any issues that myself or Fitz might have with the coercive control side of the plot aren't problems because the show is discussing a thematic relevant issue in general.
No. I'd love to see.
Look, it's a new season of reviews. I feel like we should make it crystal clear once again to any new viewers who might be joining in. Doctor Who has been on the air for 62 years, and for exactly 62 of those years, the show has been political. It has always explored these kinds of socio-political themes that have been relevant to the modern era, whatever that era may have been. This is no exception, and I clicked on one YouTube thumbnab and it was clearly an echo chamber because every single comment was the show's been destroyed, wokeness, BBC, they've destroyed the show. And I'm sitting here like,
making fun of lonely gamer guys? Oh no! Why are you shitting on your fan base, Doctor Who?
Exactly, yeah. It's completely ridiculous.
No, it is. It's so stupid.
If you think this, and I encourage you to rewatch literally any classic era episode, you'll find political themes. Any RTD1 era episode, you'll find political themes. Any good one, anyway. You'll find botched political themes in the Chibnall era, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, maybe some elements in the Moffat era that aren't amazing, but even then, they don't take away from the core of Moffat's very progressive beliefs, which is pretty good. And the thing is, like, you say, Cuff, that it's been political for its whole period. It has. But I'd go even further and say that not only has it always been political, I think the core of the show has always been a progressive one. Because if you go back and you look at, certain stories, are there very serious ethical mistakes that have been made that need to be addressed? Fuck yes. I mean, the talents of Wang Shang. I mean, do I really need to say anything more there? And that is bad. That's serious, and we need to not only acknowledge it, but we need to try and continuously improve it as the show goes on, right?
Certainly.
But even with those missteps, the core of it has always been a pro-peace, pro-egalitarian, progressive message. And even the feminist angle, right? That got worked in, I think, a lot earlier than most people realize. I mean, Sarah Jane Smith, again, do I really need to say much more there? So it's always been there. And it's good that that tradition is being carried on here. And even if, I want these themes explored in a, in my view, a more cohesive or more effective way, I'm glad they're here, right? Let me be very clear about that. I think I just want to get back to my main criticism of the whole thematic incel misogyny, whatever thing. You say that I seem to be looking for more of a detailed backstory with Alan, and that just doesn't interest you. Fair enough, yes, and I kind of am, but I think for me, the core of the issue is it's not so much that they're cheapening the character, because I don't really care that much about him. He's just kind of a little, but I think the theme, because it's so important and so weighty, I just felt using certain narrative techniques, including a line like the Planet of the Incels, I think it's cheapening that theme, and I think it that theme needs that theme in a way because of how serious it is, and even the audience sort of deserve a bit better. I think. You may disagree, and fair enough, but I think that was the thing that really kind of got to me. Because you're right, like who no one really cares about Alan that much. He's very just a rotten little, you know what. But yeah, I think that was the main thing.
Sure. Moving on to other topics, I like the throne room scene quite a lot. I like how tense the whole thing was.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
Actually, sorry, my mistake. Everything from Belinda realizing that the robots are in charge and the Miss Belinda Chandra kind are essentially enslaved. Everything from that point to the rebellion storming the throne room was very, very tense and suspenseful in a really, really good way. The Doctor's like stilted dialogue, like as the historian getting every ninth word across as a message, like
that was
fun stuff.
Clever.
Really tense, really suspenseful. Like it puts you right in Belinda's shoes. It's really good stuff.
And it works well because when I first saw that scene where the Doctor's having to sort of emphasize every ninth word, I thought, I don't know how I feel about that because like can't the robots hear him and doesn't this sound weird? But then I quickly picked up on, oh no, this is a weird thing. Something's going on here. And he says, yeah, they can't hear every ninth word. And even that idea, that doesn't get explained in explicit detail. We just kind of get, the computer runs on like an every 8 circuits or something like that. But we don't need that much of an explanation.
No.
It's one of those things where, because this story is kind of taking risks in terms of, again, how much they're cramming into the episode. But it's one of those ideas that they can afford to rush through, and that's actually really great. I think it's quite clever that RTD has managed to do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, like making the Doctor that historian figure and integrating him into this rebel society is quite clever. And making it like as convincing as it is. Like as you say, we've missed basically 6 months of this character's life, but we don't. Like, we feel the weight of that, but this is still the same character that we know, right? And I know that seems kind of obvious, but it's still really great to see all those things working as well as they are, at these points. Can I just very briefly, I just want to go back to the thematic stuff for a second,
okay.
Although a slightly different angle. I'm not going to harp on about it like I did, but I will say, one, in terms of the, I guess, the subtlety angle that I'm sort of going with, I want more detail, whatever, with these themes. We should be clear, even in other forms of satire within both the classic and New Who, Doctor Who's not the most subtle show, right?
No.
I mean, it can be when it needs to be, with its satire for sure. But this is a show with episodes like, the Happiness Patrol, and it's like, oh, that smiling woman who's leading a dictatorship and really hates a group of mine workers. Man, I wonder if there's someone in real life who's maybe running the country at the moment who's like that. It really makes you think. Or maybe a more recent example, and something that RTD wrote himself, the massive weapons of destruction line
I was wondering
of London World War III. Granted, I still think thematically those themes are explored better in that story. Maybe not entirely, but I think it generally was, partly because it was a two-parter. But, again, let's be clear, it's not as if subtlety has been the strong point of the themes, at least in this show. So maybe, that's definitely something for me to consider. Indeed, I may be wrong on that. My point, I mean. So there's that. The other thing, thematically, that I find interesting is, as we said, misogyny is clearly a theme in this story, and how it impacts women's lives, and specifically Belinda's life. But the interesting thing is, it shows up obviously in the small interactions between Belinda and Alan, right? But it manifests in other small areas too. Some of it
Manny?
with yes, like
Yeah.
the fact that and granted, like we don't know the whole story. We don't know what the twist is, and the fact that it's all of this is Alan's doing. But even before we know that, the fact that the guy immediately goes to blaming the woman who just showed up. I mean, look, I'm not a woman. Cuff isn't either. I don't doubt that there's whole dimensions to that sort of thing that Cuff and I have no idea about. But I'd be willing to bet there's probably a number of women in the audience who probably thought, yeah, that sucks, because I've had that happen to me before. Men blaming me for my mistakes and taking credit for the good things that I do. So that was actually, I think, quite interesting that they do that. But also, and I get that it's a bit of a different dynamic, but the way that Belinda stands up to the Doctor.
Yeah.
Because, look, I don't think, especially shooting up as Doctor, I don't think you could effectively label him as misogynist of really any stripe. But the things that she's calling him out on are things that the Doctor has done for decades. Talking over people, putting them through weird bio scans. And I know these are small things, but these are just things that we as the audience have considered normal, and it's really interesting that Belinda's calling them out at this point. And
Yeah,
you
totally.
could say that, is that a misogyny-specific problem, or is that just a sort of a Doctor General problem? It kind of is misogyny-specific, because even if you argue that, Jodie Whittaker's Doctor did some very shitty things, these specific issues were established way before,
Yeah.
way before the New Who era ever started. This easily goes back to, the classic series where, I mean, I'm drawing a blank on specific examples, but you know what I mean, Cuff. There's moments where the
Totally,
Doctor's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
"Oh, I'm so sorry, person. I have to knock you out now to take you to this place. No, I didn't ask you if I could do that, but I'm gonna do it anyway." You know what I mean? Things like that.
Well, also,
And
even more specifically related to like the exact things that Belinda's calling this Doctor out on. You got Matt Smith's Doctor secretly scanning Amy to see if she's pregnant or not. You've also got Matt Smith's Doctor. A huge part of the reason he selected Clara as a companion is because she was a mystery that he could solve.
Yeah, exactly. And she says, Belinda says, "I'm not your adventure," which is great.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And that scene, by the way, where he's sort of pushing her and to find out this mystery and doing this bioscan, that was very interesting because it's not even the same thing as other scenarios where, look, arguably it wouldn't be good for the Doctor to do that at any time, but if there's like a literal life or death situation where the Doctor has to make a move like that, that kind of makes sense. But as you say, this isn't it. This is, I get that it is foreshadowing a greater threat, but in that moment, let's be very clear, the Doctor just wants to satisfy his own curiosity. And you know what? Belinda is perfectly right for her to basically say, "That's not good enough, Doctor. Please don't do that."
Well, I suppose we'll discuss the final scene now.
Yeah, sure.
It is interesting that they've basically already flagged. Okay, so we've met this other person. We know they're your descendant. But we should take a look at that genetic match. Maybe that could be something, and leaving that open, and then having Belinda rightly call it out as well. That's basically nothing. I don't care about that. Take me home. It then means that we, the audience, also swiftly forget about that when we're confronted with a significantly deeper mystery that will almost certainly define the rest of the season. This whole concept of something is repelling the TARDIS from landing on modern day Earth,
and it looks like the Earth blew up.
Well, that too. They don't know the specifics of that yet, but halfway between Earth and Miss Belinda Chandra, there is some force repelling the TARDIS away. That was interesting enough, and then you watch the TARDIS dematerialize, and you see some debris.
Yeah,
and holy goddamn, this is a compelling mystery box. Yeah, for an opener, this is something. Like, we've seen the Earth get destroyed before. We've seen stuff like this. We've seen humanity erased. We've seen life extinguished. We've seen Daleks invade. We've never seen that happen this early. Like, it's done.
Yeah.
It's
And
we've
to
seen
also
it
have
happen.
it so unresolved, it's like,
Yeah.
yep, the Earth blew up. But no, you're not going to find out about that in the next episode because we've got other crazy shit to do. So deal with that, audience.
The Earth and everybody on it is extinguished.
Yeah.
In comes Mr. Ring-a-Ding. Focus on
Also-
that now.
Also, specifically, and I noticed this on a second watch. Perhaps you did too. They have the calendar, and all the days are crossed off except for May 24th, 2025. So maybe it's implying that something specifically on that day caused the Earth to explode. But yeah, which is very interesting.
And we do get a little Mrs. Flood thing at the start of the episode, which could lead into it. You know, she's living in a new place now. She's not on that same council estate that Ruby lives in. She's changed home address. And
so she's not bullying that neighbor of hers anymore.
Nope, and by happenstance, she is once again living next door to a companion. I think this must mean something. I highly doubt this is a coincidence. But did you notice the look that she gives the Doctor when he appears? Like, there is like a very quick panic in her eyes.
No, I didn't quite notice it. To be fair, that scene is pretty insane, but yeah, I didn't quite notice that little look. But that's interesting.
There is the briefest glimpse of recognition on her face, and then as she leaves, she says to camera, "You didn't see me."
Yeah,
and then goes, "I have no more doubt. There's not a single doubt in my mind that whatever has happened to the Earth is Mrs. Flood's doing."
We will see.
I feel so very confident that this is the case.
Yeah, no. It's fine. I'm not grasping at straws. What are you talking about?
Well, she sees the Doctor, and then on that same day, the Earth explodes. Obviously,
Winky Dink.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think she saw him. She saw him leave specifically, and then she set up this planetary TARDIS force field, preventing him from getting in, so that she could do what she needed to before the Doctor worked out how to get back in and stop her. I am so confident. In fact, I'm going to take my points now. I'm not, but that's how confident I am.
How much did I give you for that?
You gave me
3,500.
3,500.
Fair enough. Also, a small thing with Mrs. Flood. I saw this some post the other day on Facebook, but it was Mrs. Flood's outfits in comparison to other companions, but there were more that I wasn't aware of. So we know she was wearing the same jumper and collared shirt outfit that Clara was wearing, but then there's another scene, I think it might have been her opening scene, where she's wearing an outfit similar to Rory, and then there's a scene in, it might be a still from this new series, but either way, one where she's in the snow and she's wearing a white coat, but that's very similar to one that Romana once wore. So
that was at the end of last season.
Right. Whether those are just Easter eggs, I don't know. At this point, I could believe either. But obviously something's going on with this character. Whether that'll get revealed this season, I hope for my sake and the point scoring it doesn't, but we'll see. I can't let Cuff win.
Well, we're here now. Let's go over the points that we've been allocated so far, and let's just see if anything has come to light or hasn't. So far, I think there's... Look, I've written down Mundy Flynn is just Belinda's descendant. I mean, technically, that's true.
But it is still the first episode. That could still be...
Yes, and also, there is also the word just in there. If it could transpire that along with being Belinda's descendant, there's also something more alien regarding Mundy's origin.
More remarkable, yeah, sure.
Yeah, exactly. Mrs. Flood being Big Bad, obviously, I feel confident about that. Let's move forward. I don't think you're going to get 100,000 points for Belinda is an amnesiac Time Lord, but hey, could still happen.
Stranger things have happened in Doctor Who.
Could still happen. The whole bottle episode where they're in the TARDIS, I think that was because of the few clips of like the time shenanigans from this episode.
Which already happened.
Exactly. So I think, again, might still work, but I think it's looking unlikely. We also have, you think the Daleks will return? I think there's also, that was because of the disintegration effects from the robots in this episode, as well as the robot sources again in this episode. So both clues to Dalek are gone. Again, Mrs. Flood could be in cahoots with the Daleks. We don't know yet, but it's not looking good for you at the moment.
I should also point out, and granted, this is just a headline I read. I didn't actually read the article.
Sure.
Which now makes me feel very embarrassed. But anyway, I didn't read the article, but just a headline saying that RTD said there are going to be no returning villains in this series. I don't know how true that is, but it probably is true. So there you are. Okay. So damn, this is what happens when you gamble, audience. This is what happens.
And make sure you take Fitz's "this is what happens when you gamble" as a cautionary tale, not mine, because I'm gambling and winning so far. So,
sorry, could you say that again? I got a.
Well, I'm also gambling, and I'm also gambling, and I'm coming out on top. So, this is what happens when you gamble is strictly Fitz's situation right now. Don't take my situation as gambling. Or
no. You're playing the speculative market. That's what you're doing, Cuff.
Sure, yeah.
You're strategizing is what you're doing.
I'm hunkering down. I'm observing market behaviors over the last 5 years, and look, I've got a system.
Yeah.
Would you like to give the Robot Revolution a score out of 10?
Yeah. I think I'm going to go with a 7.
Yeah, I am gonna rock with an 8. Like I said, I think that for my money, the themes are working together way better than maybe you'll give me credit for. Maybe I'm wrong about that, though. We'll see in time. But I do think that everything in this episode worked well enough for me to warrant an 8.
Sure. I'm going to stick with a 7. I think, because I was reminded a little bit of the Star Beast, because, again, there are a lot of different elements in that plot, and I wasn't sure how well they all work together. Granted, nowhere near as frustrating as the ending of that episode, but,
sure.
Similar echoes, I guess. So I was kind of comparing it. This is still definitely better. I can't remember whether I gave the Star Beast a 6. I want to say a 6.
You did. Yeah, you did.
Okay, so I think for that reason, I think a 7 is appropriate, and I think for me, the good bits in it, I actually really, really did enjoy. But those small elements were enough for me to sort of knock it down a couple of pegs. So yeah, I'm going to go with a 7.
All right. Well, next time on the show, it's the episode where if I get a certain prediction right, I will automatically win the entire thing based on how many points are on offer. We're going to be reviewing Lux, and I'll be paying close attention to those mouse ears. I'm going to have my eyes peeled.
And if that does come true, my head's going to explode in the recording. So be there for that.
But until then, I'm Alex.
I'm Fitz, and I really hope my head doesn't have to explode.
And remember, from all of us here at Two Who's Review, don't be an Alan.
Yeah, never. Never, ever, ever. Blech.